Welcome everyone to our monthly meeting. Eden Leaders Institute presents lessons from the Good Shepherd, about the Good Shepherd and for the Good Shepherd, and I'm trusting that you are all good shepherds in your various roles. We've been doing this now for a good long while. We have a number of YouTube video streams. If you want to look at some of the old stuff, you go to YouTube and search my name and Lead Like the Good Shepherd or the Good Shepherd, and up should come a number of things to select from. Today is really cool. I have Tom Nolan with me, and we're going to do this together with him primarily taking the lead. Uh, uh, every time I do this, I have to get the technology down. Here we go. So, you all, those of you that have been in here know who I am. I've been running Eden Leaders Institute and Eden Counseling Center for a number of years. I've had the privilege of taking various leadership roles over the years, and in the last 5 years, although I've been counseling and coaching leaders for 30 years, the last 5, that's really my focus. So what we're doing here is really close to my heart, very important, that we are able to get together, talk about, and promote healthy leadership principles, both from the Bible, from social science, and as Tom shares today, from models from other leaders who are effectively running their organizations. So the Institute has existed for quite a while. We rebranded it just a few years ago with the goal to really help leaders in the mental health field. Those are the trainees that I work with right here in Norfolk, Virginia, but pastors and business leaders around the world, as those of you from Romania are tuning in. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. So we do this every third Thursday at noon. You can look for the YouTubes, and for those who have access to us, I want to get involved in personal coaching and consulting. It can be done online, face-to-face. We do a variety of ways with this. And Tom himself is a consultant and a coach. Tom and I first met in probably was December of 2001. Tom was introduced by a mutual friend, and he had been actively involved with World Vision and distributing donated funds to individuals. And I think our first meeting, Tom, we cried together and laughed together, and we established ourselves as friends. We connected right away. And over the years, we have collaborated together. Tom is on the Eden Leaders coaching team, and we bring him down to we had a big church we did. Tom came down, Richard Kidd and I and Becky, and so we function as a team whenever possible. We enjoy each other's company, we enrich each other's lives, and we bring skill sets that are complementary. So today we're going to have Tom the teacher on board, sharing from his vast story of wisdom. And here at the beginning, you'll see his email. At the end, we have his website. He's got useful resources there.
Just FYI, that email is T Nolan, not Tom Nolan.
All right, let's fix that.
First adjustment.
Everybody take note of that, because I got a Tom Nolan at the end too. So good.
Okay.
So it's tnolan at growthmission.com, and his website is of a similar.
And it's .org.
There we go.
And
I probably have it wrong twice.
Growthmission.org would be the website.
All right. So let's get off this slide into Tom's business. So mostly his is correct. So I'm going to change presenters, Tom. I'm going to stop showing this screen. I'm going to change presenters, and you'll have to accept the invitation. And that should be coming your way.
Got it.
All right. And Tom's taken over. The technology has us in different spaces, communicating the same way you all are with each other. So if you'll expand your screen so you're seeing that as large as you can. And Tom, you might need to increase the view a little bit.
All right, let me just get to something here. Is that visible like that, or do we need to do something?
It is. If you would go to view and increase it just a little bit. I usually go 200%. Yeah, that's good. That's great. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, good to hang with everybody today. It's exciting to be in a place other than New York, where I live, where it's been freezing cold. Last time I was in New York, we left in the middle of a blizzard and heading back here today. So just excited to be looking out at the sunshine in beautiful Virginia Beach, where my wife and I had a little getaway for Valentine's Day. So always nice to hang out with Paul and his team here. So what we're going to do today, we're going to be looking at some ideas for those that have busy lives, and we're assuming that you're pastors or leaders and involved with trying to manage lots and lots of details and things that are pulling on your life for attention in lots of ways. So we're going to start out with prayer first, and then I'll just share a couple of thoughts there. So Father, we just want to thank you for your grace as we are committed to serve you, as we open our hearts before you, Lord. We pray that you would allow your Holy Spirit to be in our midst as we counsel together with you, O Lord. We pray that you would give us better tools in our hands, Lord, to fight the good fight of faith and to be able to make a difference in the lives of those that you've called us to impact. So we just thank you in advance in Jesus' name. So what we're going to look at is the idea of prioritizing our busy lives. That's one of the main focuses we're going to be looking at.
Muted.
And so we have this concept of an activity log. And Paul or Maribel, let me ask, later on, are things available like Word docs or things like that? Is that something that people can get
Unmuted.
enough here, or?
Yeah, we can certainly forward. We'll forward all the handouts to everybody when we're done, as well as a survey.
I have already forwarded all the documents to everybody that was registered. So everybody should have
amazing efficiently. Okay. And then there'll be a PowerPoint. I can do the same with that at the end here. So what we want to do is we want to think about all of the things that are involved in our lives. What are the things that are the activities of our life? So as we think about maybe a busy pastor, what are some of the things? We begin to identify them and actually write them down on a piece of paper. So this particular, we have 21 spots here, but you might be doing more, or you might be doing less, but I'd like you to identify the things, like think in the course of a week, or even in the course of a month, because some things will rotate. What are the things that I actually do with my life and my time? And begin to put them down on a piece of paper like this. And we begin to identify the things that are tugging on us from various directions, and we begin to acknowledge what they are and what are those things. And then the next level we're going to be looking at here is we want to look at a model. This is something that many of you might be familiar with, but it's Stephen Covey. I think he's the origin of this. Very little do I come up with on my own. I'm a really good stealer of other people's stuff, things that I like or work for me. And so what we want to look at here is we have the opportunity to think about all of the things that we just put down in the activity log, and we want to put them somewhere on this grid. It's a 4-part grid, and so we're looking at, on the top here, we're looking at urgent and non-urgent. And then on the left-hand side of mine, it would be important and not important. So if we were going to be looking at those things. So we're going to be taking some ideas from our activity log, and we begin to plug them in somewhere on in these boxes. So if we thought about things that are urgent in our lives, what are some of the things that are urgent? And Paul, can I bounce with you a little bit here? Are you available to just chat with me?
Certainly.
All right. So we'll do this in tandem a little bit. But if we think about, let's put ourselves in the position of maybe a busy pastor. Let's think in terms of a church that might be 200 members and a busy pastor. So we have a pastor and maybe a part-time associate and not too many other staff. So what are urgent things that would usually end up on a pastor's desk? They're screaming out for attention. They're crisis. They're pressing problems. They're deadlines or emergencies that they're in front of them on a continual basis. So can you give me a couple of thoughts, Paul?
Let me take a second here and remind everybody that you have a control panel with chat, and if you have any, I'm going to monitor it. And so if you have a thought or a suggestion or a question, so like when Tom throws this out, if you're a pastor and something pops into mind, send it to me and we'll share it. So you can just write chat and share it, and you can join us. So that's great. So Tom, we're looking at urgent and important or unimportant at this point.
Let's just look at the urgent top left quadrant here. Okay. So things that are urgent and important.
So you may be a pastor and there's a crisis in a family, and so you have to mobilize ministry quickly. That would be something that, somebody died or somebody's gravely ill. So that would have high importance, and it would be urgent because it needs immediate response.
Right. So then we have this other category. It's important but not urgent. So if we think about a couple of things in that category, what would come to mind for the same individual, same busy pastor? What's happening in their lives?
So let's say the pastor has an open, transparent relationship with his members, and they're free to criticism. So he gets emails that they didn't like this song, or they didn't like that bit of the sermon, or they felt left out of something. So their relationship is important, but this is not an urgent matter. Odds are that's a chronic complainer anyway, and it's an ongoing kind of process to work with it.
So we would probably put that in the non-important bottom right-hand column, right? Like something like that. That it's not urgent, and it's probably not that important.
Okay.
Sometimes those things can fall into an important category because they're we have to put out a fire or something like that. But in this category, I think in terms of like health is one of those issues for so many pastors around at least in the U.S. Health is a gigantic issue. Taking care of your diet, getting to the gym, getting some exercise in your life, marriage health, relational health, extremely important but not urgent. Marriages tend to be one of those areas that we're busy, we're cooking, we're doing all kinds of things, but it's not screaming out for attention until such a point, and sometimes it moves over, and that's where we need Dr. Paul Van Valen to intervene in our lives here when it starts screaming out for being urgent on the other side. So what else strikes you, Paul, as like important but not urgent, like things like that from even from a clinical point of view, people you're involved with that
Okay, so you've opened so you've focused the arena on, I get where you're headed with that. Thank you very much. So marital health, mental health, recreation, one's personal spiritual health, all that health business and all the domains would be really, really important, but not urgent.
right.
Planning, perhaps some planning meetings, like it's really important to lay your vision out clearly, but you don't have to do it today,
Right.
But if we let it go too long, it'll become urgent.
Right. And then as we think about the, let's say the not important, non-urgent category, the bottom right here, what things would we generally think would fit into that category?
Facebook, all kinds of stuff that could become a distraction that is neither important or urgent. So we have to, you've got. I notice you have emails in several categories. So we have to discern which of these should go in which category. So.
Right. So that's I think that's an important component. Like there are some things, and we have to discern what they are. So you just can't say emails are not important because very often they're our primary means of communication, and if I don't deal with this, then it's very problematic. It creates a crisis that doesn't have to happen. But then there is a ton of emails that I get. I'm sure we're all in the same boat where I can be looking at a Groupon or something like that about a vacation, and it's taking my time, and it's kind of more like a time waster than something that's going to help me in any way in my life. So all of those things have to be categorized. So our sense of activities, basically going back to that activity sheet, we want to find a way where we can actually plug them in here and actually put some bullet points in our life in these 4 quadrants and begin to pay much more attention to the things that are important, whether they're urgent. The urgent things are going to be crying out for attention. The non-urgent things are going to be sometimes the most important part of our life because it's our children aren't going to be crying out for attention often. Our wife may not be crying out for attention. Our health may not be crying out. But then at some point it becomes, if we don't deal with it, then it becomes a crisis. We end up in the hospital. We end up with a marriage problem that's now a major challenge. So I want to challenge everybody to think in those terms, is to try to identify our various activities, and then as we think about what to do with them. I'm going to give you another little exercise here. This is something we call, and this is stolen from the Halftime group. Halftime, if you're not familiar, primarily works with business leaders and people that are professionals. And what we're trying to do in coaching with them is we're helping them to go from success to significance. So we're doing things in life. We're successful in business. We're successful in some way, but we're trying to move towards more significance, making a greater kingdom impact, making a difference in the world. And so this is one of those exercises, the same kind of basic thing. We take that activity sheet and we begin to plug in a couple of categories here. We're going to be looking at the heart. Is it something that I enjoy? I'm edified by it. I'm lifted up. I'm enthused about it. Number two, it has an impact. It has a significant impact in the world, in the church, in my organization. In the area of growth, I get some personal growth out of it. Somebody else gets personal growth out of it. And or it's an obligation. Somebody is mandating it. I may not be that enthused, but it's a high obligation factor, which is very common, particularly in the pastor world. So, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put a numeric value on that from 1 to 5. So 5 being something that in my heart is important, I would put a 5. So Paul, as we've done this before, why don't we try to put ourselves in the pastor's shoes? And
Sure.
so what would be an activity of a typical pastor, and then we'll try to think of a high priority factor
Sure.
and a low priority.
So an obvious one for a pastor would be weekly sermon preparation.
Okay. So when we think of that, now this is arbitrary, but I know you prepare sermons periodically, so I know just from talking to a lot of pastors, this sometimes has that sense of obligation, and sometimes it is the thing that is exciting and it fills their bucket up quite a bit to, which can be a pro and a con. I was just talking to a pastor recently, and he spends almost 2 full days locked in his office and doing sermon prep, and people around him are beginning to grumble about the fact that he's spending way too much time in that area, but it's so uplifting for him that he's spending a ton of time there. But we're actually trying to help him to adjust that a little bit. But just give me your personal view as you're preparing sermon. Paul.
Yeah,
how do you feel?
It's a 5. I mean, I'm excited. I believe that God has a message to share. I like the process of preparing it, so that'd be a 5.
Okay. And then just the idea of like the impact that makes on you, the kingdom, the church, the congregation. How would you rate?
Yeah.
And again, this is going to be very personalized.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be doing it unless it was a 5. Requires a lot of transparency. You're sharing of yourself. You're sharing of your walk with the Lord, trying to lead others. So hopefully it's, you expect it to inspire others.
Right. And then in the sense of growth, personal growth for others, where would you put that?
I think if I'm in a healthy place, it's a 5 also, because I'm probably studying and enriching my capacity to conceptualize and communicate.
Okay. And then, again, depending on the type of church you're involved with, some churches, they only have the senior pastor be the speaker, and he gets 2 weeks vacation. And then in other churches, we have guest speakers all the time. We have missionaries coming in. But the sense of obligation, maybe in something you might observe there, Paul, what would you put obligation?
I would assume most pastors would call it a 5. There are some multi-team groups where you can pass that off pretty easily, but I think most leaders would call that a 5.
Okay, so now let's think of something a little lower on the scale that pastors have to deal with, I think we could be a little tricky in the area of, let's say, counseling, since this is your sense of expertise, and you would have a lot of informed understanding about this. But let's say the area of counseling folks in the congregation.
Oh yeah, that's good, because I've talked to pastors. One guy said, if I had to do what you did, I'd just jump out the window and hope that the world would change, something like that. So so let me play people I know.
Okay.
So the heart would be maybe a 3 or a 4 in that they care for the people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not personally uplifting. And the impact, actually counseling can be a discouraging thing. So a pastor might rate the impact of them engaged in counseling as a 2. I mean, because they don't see rapid change sometimes. Yeah. Personal growth could be a 2 or a 3, depending on their ability to invest themselves in developing this skill. So I would say, maybe a 3 or a 2. 2's fine. And And depending on how they've defined their role, so the obligation might be a 4 because the expectation of the member.
So sometimes it's expected in the congregation that that's part of your job description,
Right.
and you realize often you're not well equipped and it's taking a lot of your time. I was just talking to a pastor a couple of weeks ago, and they're kind of a small church that's been struggling under 100 for quite a while. And the primary work that the pastors are involved with are counseling needy folks. That seems to be almost, maybe a high percentage of, like 80% of what they do in ministry on the pastoral staff is on that level.
Right.
So as I'm looking at that, having a liaison like yourself or an organization that can take all of that weight off of a pastor gives them the opportunity, but they end up getting cloistered in this world where everything is about problem solving and working with people's needs, but they're doing very little outreach, very little evangelism, very little in the area of mission or things of that nature. So therefore the church is suffering, in my opinion at least.
Right. Right. And if I was a pastor, even if I loved counseling, I would make sure that did not become my main, time commitment. So I would, as you said, outside resources, developing lay ministry, finding those leaders that have the natural gift and giving them the empowerment and developing the culture that people can move from the pastor to somebody who can actually do better than me. That would be high priority in terms of development.
So as we start filling in this, all these activities, you could see that as you're honest and just asking yourself these questions as you're going along, you'll find at the end on the total side, you'll find some that are 10, 11, very low numbers, and then some that are high on the 20. And very often that speaks something to us about what we should be doing. At least it's something that gives us edification. It has value, and then we see things that are creating very low value and things that we probably should be thinking about cutting out of our life in some way or delegating to somebody else that they might be more inspired, or farming it out even to an organization like Eden that does that with great expertise. But we can actually use this whole model as a problem solving, as you and I are talking now, Paul. What's even coming out of our mouths is solving problems for, we can do this, we can do that. It's just the natural outworking of understanding some things. Once we start doing some measurements, we understand that there can be something we can do with that. And so it's very challenging for a pastor or any kind of leader, whether you're a nonprofit leader, business leader. I'm not sure exactly who's on the call here, but everybody fits into this kind of thing somewhere. We're all doing some things that are not, our heart is not in it as much. It doesn't have an impact. It might have a high obligation. Another area for many might be like the idea of going to the hospital, praying for the sick, or visiting the sick in the hospital, something like that, where there's an expectation from the congregation, but get very little out of it. And some people might actually love that kind of thing because it gives them an opportunity to interface with family. And it all depends on your gift mix and your calling to some degree, I think. So anyway, that's just another tool there. Go ahead, Paul. Yeah,
just to answer your question, I took a quick look at who's in the room, and we've got pastors, lay leaders, and business leaders, a mix of folks who are with us today.
All right, great. So these are kind of tools. We'll just put them out here for you to think about. Is this something that can help me in a very short exercise, just taking some time to create an activity log and then plug it into those two categories? One would be much more about heart. One is much more about the idea of urgency and importance, and some of those kind of things.
Tom, could I just share how this changed my life? Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
So we did this exercise. Tom and Linda his wife were working with Becky and me. We spent days in retreat sometimes during 2012, and Becky took a look at this and said, "Well, I can cut out Facebook, I can cut out TV," and I looked at my list and I said, "I got to cut out counseling." Which was a earth shaker, because where I thought God was calling me was to work with leaders, but what it did was, I just said, how is this possible? And I spent several months looking at my caseload, conceptualizing, and right today I have a caseload. I went from 55 counselees a week to 10, and I increased some assessment projects, which I really love, and I've increased coaching. So I'm much happier. And I feel like the impact of my work in ministry is much more effective as a result of taking the time to really, really look hard and fast at what I was doing, because I was functioning out of habit of 30 years, and it was time to make a change. So this is just a tool. This was really pivotal for me. As we're looking at this, it's reminding me of all that, Tom.
And I think, as I recall, one of the big takeaways as we were chatting is not only counseling, just like mandate of how many, but it was like who, what kind of people should I be giving my heart and my life to? And so we determined, I think, if this sounds correct to you, more senior leaders, people that had more complex lifestyle, as opposed to just moms and dads and nice Christian folks, but trying to focus more on senior leader levels and helping senior leaders get better at what they do. Actually helped to launch the Leadership Institute. Does that sound about right?
It does. And we have a comment from Lisa Cooper who says that, life is complicated for individuals who are, they're tent makers. They're doing business and ministry and family. So she's speaking just to the realities that our lives are very complex, and we have to really tune into the priorities of life in order to not burn out. She's not saying that, but that's my take on all those things that have to be balanced.
That was a long chat if it was. Yeah. So what we want to do now is we want to look at some other ideas here in relationship to goal setting and keeping things at a priority.
Let's say just a second, Tom. So Cornell's agreeing with Lisa. So I would take that previous exercise just to help them understand. It's not just about work. When we did this, we put social, we put grooming. I had sleep. Food preparation. Really taking a look at everything to try to figure out where should I be spending my time. And as you do this, I would encourage you to do the same thing. Include family, include ministry, include business, and just see what lays out as what God speaks to you through that. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to move into a different area that's much more ministry focused. But I think it is important to understand that we are whole human beings, and as we talked about those quadrants before, that's where a lot of that stuff shows up. Where if we're not paying attention to the important things that are not crying out for help, like our health, or getting to the gym, maintaining a marriage that's healthy, having date nights, some of these kinds of things, our prayer life, our devotion life, some of the very basics of our faith, things like that, they have to find a place in the important side, or else we are not full human beings. And it's not about only being productive in ministry, but it's about being healthy in ministry as well.
Yeah, thanks.
So what we're going to do, we're going to shift gears just a wee bit here, and we're going to look at goal setting in relationship to keeping the most important things important. So as we're looking at just a wide variety of activities and things we're involved with, and then we're going to look at we've used some of those tools to try to identify, separate the important from the non-important, even thinking about the idea of, instead of creating a to-do list every day or every week, we're doing a to-do list, we start thinking about a don't-do list. So we're looking at a bunch of things that we do, and we're going to begin to cut things out of our life that are non-productive. They don't help us in any way. They're time wasters. They're in that quadrant where they're crying out for attention, but they're not very, very important in our lives. So we're going to be able to look at some goals in a slightly different point of view here. And so this is a quote from an old ministry mentor, kind of a guy from Northern California, a little bit of a hillbilly, but he used to say a lot of interesting colloquial things like this: it's better to aim at the moon and miss it than aim at a skunk and hit it. Just thinking about the idea of raising our expectation and our goals, and the idea of what we do with our lives as far as goal setting, and the importance of putting things on paper and identify what's important and what's not important. So a dream written down with a date becomes a goal. A goal broken down into steps becomes a plan. And a plan supported by action becomes a vision fulfilled. So we think about the little steps we take throughout the days, months, and years that actually get us to a whole different place in life. We have an opportunity through goal setting and through setting up goals, particularly about important things as opposed to non-important things. And so when I talk about goals, very often I'm thinking about things that I'm involved with personally. And one of my one of my favorite things to do is actually go take a run and go run somewhere. And I realized that if I go run a race or I just run for fun, it's a very, very different thing. If I'm going to do a half marathon, and that half marathon is on March 20th, at the end of the winter, and I have to prepare for that, I have to set little deadlines along the way. And anybody that's done a race, you realize you generally do some very basic training, but then you do a long run every week. And so on your Saturday or Sunday, you're incrementally advancing only maybe sometimes a mile, but then you do that enough times and now you're running 18 miles on a weekend or something like that. But it's just tiny little incremental changes that get you to a marathon or half a marathon, but your body has to be prepared to take those things. So we're going to look at the idea of SMART goals, which are probably familiar to a lot of us, but we're going to look at it in context of one of these other planning models that we're going to look at called a 6x6 planning model. So a SMART goal, they need to be S for specific. What will the goal accomplish, and how and why will it be accomplished? One of the things we like to look at is the idea of outcome-based planning in a lot of what we do. So we start thinking about planning with the outcome in mind. And so very often when we're thinking about strategy particularly, we think about the idea of, let's say, a church building project. We have an artist's rendition of what the church or building might look like. We have the architectural drawing, and before we ever put a shovel in the ground, people start giving to the vision because we're creating the picture of what the future looks like, and then we begin to do all the work moving towards that. And almost every strategic plan has the same sort of components. We're praying, we're asking God, we're counting the cost of our resources and our time, and we're saying, what, oh Lord, is your call in my life? What is the future supposed to look like? And we create a vision or an outcome of the future, and then we begin to plan for that with various goals and things. So SMART goals, S is for specific, M is for measurable. How will I measure whether or not the goal has been reached? What are the indicators? How do I know if I'm hitting the target or not? The classic idea of somebody shooting an arrow at the barn and then going and drawing a bullseye around the arrow is one of those things that very often in the body of Christ we're guilty of doing that kind of thing, that we're so inspirational we can't measure whether we're hitting the target or not. We think of the idea of, like, say, bowling or something like that. We're shooting a basket with no basketball hoop. We shoot it up at the backstop, but we have no measurement because we don't have a basketball hoop up there. And once we put the hoop up, we find that we can fail quite a bit at times. We can miss the mark quite a bit. But if we don't have measurable goals, we can find ourselves in trouble. Are the goals achievable? Is it possible? Have others done it successfully? Do we have the necessary knowledge, skills, and ability and resources to accomplish that goal? Will meeting that goal challenge you without defeating you? And I think that's a very important phrase there. It might be achievable, but it's not achievable for me. Or is it something that, like running that marathon, I can never imagine myself running the marathon, but because I put smaller incremental goals, I create wins for me and my team. We can then take on larger and larger projects and things. And I think also very much based on our personality. If we are the kind of people that we have to be very exacting in what we do, and we miss the goal by something, we're going to feel like a failure all the time. And then we have a different kind of personality that if we're not stretching and really challenging ourselves, we feel bad. So you have to know yourself well enough, but I think we have to have goals that stretch us a little bit without defeating us as part of the project here. And then they should be focused on results. What are the results of what we're doing? Where are we ending up? Again, back to the outcome. Are our goals set on something that relates to outcome or results? Not necessarily the activities that lead up to it, but what is the real goal of what we're doing? And when we think about outcome, another, I think, great example. Heard this example from Willow Creek Church, that they were doing a feeding program, that they were feeding thousands of people every year up in Chicago, and they came up with the idea, they started thinking, doing some strategic planning about their lives and ministry, and they were saying, well, what are we measuring in this whole thing? We're measuring tons of food that we're giving away every year and feeling good about it. But what our outcome, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to help people get out of poverty. And so instead of measuring tonnage of food, they started measuring how do we get people out of poverty. It began to change their whole focus entirely. They just by changing what they're measuring, it changed the entire focus of the ministry. So instead of getting more and more food and more volunteers to serve food, they started interfacing with job creation, people that were training for jobs and jobs in the community, much more with the social sector of Chicago, where people could get help for all kinds of things. But the goal ended up being get out of poverty rather than just how much food do we feel good about sharing. And then time bound is a very important component in this, that we're setting a time limit. We're going to do such and so by when. What is the date of completion? And very often what we'll find is if we don't set a date on almost anything we're doing, it tends to just fall to the bottom of the priority list. But as soon as there's a date, then now it becomes a priority. It becomes something that we have to try to get done by a certain time. Therefore, it finds a place in our calendar and our life. The other little point here I want to make before we move into the 6x6 is this Pareto principle that many of you have probably heard of this, but some call it the 80-20 principle. But it's another model of thinking, how do we keep the most important thing important? So we're looking at some thoughts here like this tends to be something that just works in lots and lots of different ways, this 80-20 principle. But I'll click off a few thoughts here, which is 20% of our customers create 80% of our revenue. 80% of our sales are generated by 20% of our staff. 80% of our work is done by 20% of the team. Anybody in church world would probably kind of shift that to a 90-10 principle, perhaps in some churches, where 90% are doing almost nothing and 10% are doing all the work. 20% of our customers generate 80% of our complaints. And here's the kind of the target. What we're really looking at here is 20% of our efforts produce 80% of the results of our life. So if we started thinking about the things that are most important and spending more time with the most important things, we would find that we're generating still 80% of our effectiveness instead of getting caught in the weeds of the 80% that are time wasters and time stealers and distractors. We spend more time on the 20% and we become much more efficient. We have more free time and more effective time for lots of other things. We're going to look at something, we call this a 6x6 planning model. And this is what this looks like in a Word doc. And I'm just going to pull up a live version of this here, if you give me a sec. And what we're looking at here is we're looking at trying to get down to the most important things. So what we're going to be looking at here is we're going to be saying, what is our most important? If we had to narrow down our year into our top 3 goals for the year, what would be the top 3 goals in a 12-month cycle of our time and our effectiveness? What would be the top 3? So of all the things that are pulling us in lots of different directions, if we only pick 3 and we said, if we hit these 3 as our 20% that's going to create 80% of our effectiveness, what would those 3 things be? And this can be kind of a challenging exercise, but it is a really good exercise. And so instead of doing like thousands of things, what are the 3 top things? And so Paul, again, could I call on you a little bit just to think about like a church perhaps that is, you know, like in that category we talked about before, what would be, you know, maybe a good year-long goal for a church to be thinking about? Like, is there?
So I'm thinking about a real church, and
okay.
And it's raised $2.5 million.
Okay. That's a good-sized church, maybe?
Yeah, it's a good-sized church. They're in an expansion. They're in a building program.
All right. So that's a fine goal. So then, what would be our maybe number 2 goal in there? In a real church.
Establish standards of performance for all staff and volunteers. performance standards or review standards, different way to say it. Job descriptions and standards of performance.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah. So that's like job descriptions and accountability for each like ministry partner,
Yeah.
everybody that's involved there. So you have another thought there?
Hire an executive pastor.
Okay, good. So now what we're going to be doing, so this is like a year-long thing, and maybe hire an executive pastor would take less than a year, possibly establishing standards of performance depending on what, but what we're saying is if we did these things, they really help us to get to that maximizing experience. Some may not take a whole 12-month cycle in order to get there. But what we're going to be doing in relationship to that is, so these are yearly goals. They have to be big, audacious goals. They have to be challenges. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at, so here's our we're looking at in 6 weeks of our, looking forward 6 weeks, we're going to be attaching we're going to be attaching 2 6-week goals to goal number 1, 2 6-week goals to goal number 2, and 2 6-week goals to goal number 3. So we're going to be looking at just looking down the road for a 6-week cycle. So if we're going to raise $1.5 million or 2.5 million, sorry, what might be something, Paul, we could look at in the next 6 weeks? What would be something we could be thinking about there in relationship to perhaps a capital campaign or something like that? What would be?
We're going to hold 2 vision meetings in the next 6 weeks.
Okay. All right. Can you give me another thought on the 2.5 million?
Yeah, the other goal would be we're going to, the next 6 weeks, this particular church is highly partnered with many institutions. We're going to create a list of potential partners in this effort because of the nature of the structure we're building. So we're going to identify key partners in the business and government that may want to partner with us.
Okay. So then once we have this for all of our various goals, we're just looking ahead 6 weeks. What we're going to be doing week after week, so these other 2 columns would be a weekly experience, and so we're going to create a progress, how did we do, and a priority, what are we going to do next week. So since we're just starting the first week here, we have no progress to report on, but what could a priority be for next week? So
actually, I do. Last week we had a special service celebrating what God's going to do. So last week we had a celebrative service.
Okay.
Which was vision casting and celebration.
Okay. So we're reporting on what happened, and then so next week, based on that goal there, hold 2 vision meetings. What would be something? What might be a goal for next week?
Personal invitations are going out next week for these 2 meetings.
Okay. So we kind of get the idea of what we're doing here. We're we're trying to get everything we're doing throughout our week to be moving towards our top 3 goals. Now, if you have a staff or a team, we have the same kind of scenario. You want to encourage them. Sometimes it's related to your goals. Let's say you're the senior leader, senior pastor, and you're looking at this. Your goals might be that of the organization, and so you may want everybody to relate to your goals, or it might be a very different kind of a thing where you're this, let's say someone you're reporting to, their Sunday school director, and they have very, very little to do with raising funds, but they have to do with, you know, some other portion, but they have their own 3 goals. Sometimes they would interface with your goals, and sometimes they would not. But one of the things that happens with this particular model is we have the opportunity that, in a glance, we can look at what we're doing. And what we're trying to do is every 6 weeks we're going to re-envision another 6 weeks into the future on this left-hand column. But every week of the year, 52 weeks, we're going to say what was our progress and what was our priority in relationship to that. So we actually have a document that happens every week. We're going to redo this every week to get our sense of what we're doing and what's important. And so we have a record, and if we have, let's say we have 10 people that are reporting to us on our staff or a team, we can literally, once we've walked with them and I've identified some of the goals in their life, what is something that should be in their top 3 goals, and we kind of bounce with them a little bit on the idea of what would 6 weeks look like, and we're all in agreement. Then this other side is really, it's a 5-minute or almost a glance. It takes very, very little time, and what happens is you have the whole team moving together in the highest priority that can happen for them. It doesn't get into the minutia of everything you have to do in life, obviously, but it keeps the most important things important. And if you have somebody to report to, one way or another, some accountable person there, you know, you're reporting to the senior pastor, you're reporting to the board chair, you're reporting to somebody in the team, they can really look at this in a glance. And my suggestion is really that something like this would be done on, like, the end of the day on Friday. We take 5 minutes and we fill in our progress and our priority. And then every 6 weeks we take about 15 minutes maybe and look into the future and say, oh Lord, based on our 3 big goals here, what should I be putting before me for the next six weeks? And then begin to walk it out. And my personal experience is you would be amazed at the kinds of things you can accomplish, much like going back to the idea of like running a marathon or something like that. You can't imagine you can go out and run 24, 25 miles on a weekend just to prepare for a marathon, but it can be done in little incremental steps. And the same thing with these kind of planning models. When you take little chunks of life that are not exhaustive or abusive, they don't challenge us. They're just little things that we say, this is something I want to do, therefore it's in front of me. And we look at our 6x6, you know, once or twice a week perhaps. But eventually it becomes a habit in our life. And if we got our whole team moving in this direction, we have an amazing opportunity to move the team together in priority and in a structure that is not exhaustive. So many of our planning models that we use out there are extremely challenging and time-consuming, and they're so detailed that we get lost in the weeds. You know, a lot of us on this team, we also have used Asana. If some of you may have used that, or there's another one called Slack that I've used with different organizations. So I tend to work with lots of different organizations, and so having another one of these planning tools is very, very helpful to be able to track specific information back and forth with, and that's a place you can really get into the minutia, where emails and Excel spreadsheets and things all happening in the same place related to a project. So if you haven't looked at one of those models like Asana, then I would highly recommend looking at something like that for the details and keeping your team on track. But this is one of these things that has proven to be a good tool over the years. Almost every pastor that I get involved coaching, I'll move them into working with this at some point. Some are more resistant. Some like it and it helps them keep their feet to the fire. Some are, just much more relaxed in their way of approaching life, and it becomes a challenge. But most often people are very, very thankful once they kind of get into that world and they start doing some of these things. So, amen. Anything else, Paul, we should be thinking about here?
Yeah, let me share realistically how this got implemented in my life. So, Tom probably showed me the 6x6 about 6 years ago. Did you get that from Hybels initially?
Yeah, I think he originally, I was working with Hybels' team doing the leadership summits, global leadership summits in New York. I was like overseeing 11 sites, and so we got to interface with the team and the staff quite a bit there, and so I'm pretty sure that's where we stole it from originally. But working with the New York City Leadership Center was my main job, and so we did this as a staff for many, many years. So at the end of the year, we would have 52 of these things every year and look back. And when you were trying to do, as you were talking about with your team, Paul, like a performance review or something like that, you realize that you have a great record of, some things that you can look at.
Right. Go ahead and, Tom, make me the presenter again. And let me put the last slide up while we complete our conversation, but they'll have the resources. So if you'll sign out of your screen and let's see, you send it to me, show my screen, there we go. And
amazing technology.
And let me find our last slide here so they can be seeing this. So just a quick run here and then we'll wrap up. Those of you that are local, Bonnie Herb is holding workshops for attention deficit disorder for adults and teens. There's several of them. You can call for that. YouTube our stuff. Here's our website, Tom's. Do I have that right? Growthmission.org, Tom, this time?
Yeah.
But it's T Nolan. Let's do this right. Give me just a second here.
Let's be professionals here, Paul.
Let's get this right here for the closing. All right. So sorry about that. So that is accurate, and that's org too, isn't it? Or is it com?
It's org. Yeah, it's org.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to fix the whole thing here. This is going to end up on YouTube for 1,000 years. So let's get that right. Okay, so that's how you can reach both of us. But Tom, you started coaching me in 2012. You tried to get me to do the 6x6. You were gracious. You weren't pushy, but I just never got around to it. So I hired Tom about 4 months ago to teach my staff how to do this, and it was another 3 months. And just because life is crazy, I have 3 people quit. I have this nuts stuff happen. But I finally have been doing it for 3 weeks, and this has been after years. And Asana, I'm gonna show you what it looks like on a phone real quick. So can you see this, Tom? Is this happening?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is so easy. It sits here on my phone, and I can hit that thing, and it opens up, and then I have access to my list, my staff's list, and a thought comes to mind, and I give them a task, and I give them a deadline, and I can follow progress. And so my problem was, I had 2 calendars because we do billing things, so there's all this confidential stuff, then there's my personal stuff, and then I literally have 1,000 emails sitting unopened that I have Mirabella, my communication specialist, read out for me. And that was just inundating me with nonsense. So pretty much now I put my tasks in here, I put their tasks in here, I check it every morning, and we've now established a regular, for a few weeks, we're going to all do this together. So we have a Monday morning meeting, we're all going to look at our 6x6s, and that's going to generate great communication. So I'm excited to have Tom. Tom was in town, which is why we did this today, and he did another training with my staff this morning, and so I'm excited to share this with you all. But I also acknowledge you may not feel compelled or be able to implement tomorrow. Just hang with it. Keep hanging with us. And I needed to hire Tom. If you need a coach, we got him available. Don't live with dysfunction. That's the big thing here. We don't need to live with dysfunction. We can improve things and move ahead. So. Any other thoughts, Tom?
Well, I just want to say if there is any questions, we went through a lot of information, and sometimes this can be a little bit confusing. If, just make a note of my email. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or thoughts. And if you wanted to go to the growthmission.org website, if you go under assessment, there's a free ministry assessment tool there that that goes directly to my email also, which kind of asks a bunch of questions, but it's easy to manage. It's sort of like, what are some of your top 3 leadership challenges? What are some of your top 3 organizational challenges? But you just fill it out, but it gives you an idea, and it gives me an idea if you wanted to move forward in any way. But any kind of questions, any way I can help, we're here for you. That's what we do. Our organization is called Growth Mission. Our motto is your growth is our mission. So we are kind of a service ministry to help organizations and nonprofit leaders, churches, help them get to the next level in any way we can do that.
So we're just about to the end of our time here. If you have a chat, you want to send a question our way, we do have 5 minutes, and the chat box is a way you can ask any question you like. You just type in there and hit enter, and it will hit return, and it'll come right to us. Tom's going to be heading back home. He and I communicate most of the time using GoToMeeting, which is a great tool. This is what you're looking at now. Inexpensive. So we'll have meetings where he'll get on, and the other guys here will get on, and we'll talk about things. When I'm coaching I'm coaching a church in another state, I can be there, bring them into the room. And so there's some really inexpensive ways to stay connected with your team if they're scattered about. And so it's been fun to be able to share this all with you today. I hope it's of value. We'll be back. Let's see. I do have a comment here. So Lisa's commenting, I can see the problem in my urgent important list being too many items in any one box. And I end up in that a lot. And then what you have to do is decide which are the most important of the important and knock some of those out. So you can either start with the easiest, let's knock out some easy ones, or the most impactful, which means that something just has to wait. But there can be a lot of urgency depending on what's going on. I just got a text from my office manager that our phones broke, which paralyzes us. So that means that you just drop everything and you go fix the phones. This is that's life. That's the way it is. But I think
your elevator broke today.
Our elevator broke today, and now the phone's broke.
And
We're crippled. So life can certainly pile up. David asks, "What's the app?" It's Asana, is what I showed them. ASANA. Mirabella just answered that question. She put Asana in there. It's a free app. I think we paid a little bit to be able to get everybody in the room at the same time on the same app, but it's cheap. All this stuff's cheap, really inexpensive. And so that's what we got going there. I think every day you prayerfully consider, Lord, what do you have for me today? Help me to do your will. And I trust that what I can't get done, we'll all survive. So Mirabella says Asana is free up to 15 users in a workspace. So she's given us a little information there for you to be aware of. Little plug for Asana.
The other thing that's interesting about that is you can actually have whole different organizations connected in one, and I think that is 3 or 4 different organizations. So I could actually be fully interfacing with Paul. I could work with World Vision. I could work with another organization. We can have totally separate workspaces with all of my responsibilities in there, and you can actually switch organizations like personal, corporate, church, things like that too. So,
well, it works great for family too. You got a young adult, you got a teenager, you want to keep track of chores, whatever. I mean, it's just really handy stuff. And since it's in my pocket, that's the key. I can be driving the car, pull over. If I'm in my right mind, I pull over, make a note, get back on the road. If I'm out of my mind, you know what happens. So yeah, that's good. Any other thoughts, questions? We had a couple there. It was good. And so David asks if it has a calendar. Mirabella, you want to answer that one? I don't rely on it. I mean, it certainly does. I mean, you
it gives alerts.
You put due dates in it. Yeah, you put due dates in it, and it gives you alarms. You connect it to your email. So in my email, you have this done, you haven't done that. So it really is a really good integrated system. Yeah.
But the calendar is more of a project-based calendar. So for every project, you can have a different calendar. Because it's a task management and project management type app. So you can definitely get to where you share a calendar with a family, for example, for certain things, but it works as tasks with a due date in the calendar rather than just managing appointments.
Right. Yeah, so I have a Google Calendar, and I still have several calendars that I integrate as well as I can. But I mainly use this to just look at what do I have to do today, what does somebody else have to do today, are we behind, are we ahead? It's just a real quick, easy thing. It's not an all-in-one, I don't think, depending on the nature of your work, but it's a really good add-on. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
We want to close in prayer there,
Yeah.
Doc?
Yeah. So, Lord, we're grateful for Tom. I ask that you bless him and his ministry, keep him safe, safe travels home. Thankful so much you brought him into my life, and I know he blesses so many. So give he and Linda safe travel home. Give them strength and enrichment. Help him to prosper so he can continue to do what he does so very well. Thank you for those in the room today. Bless them, their families, their ministry. Keep us healthy. Keep us focused. Help us to figure out what it is exactly you want us to do and do it with all our hearts. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you all. We'll see you next month. God bless.